I've never played a Metroid game. Okay, that's a lie. I got Metroid Prime 3 in the Wii era, played it for like 30 minutes, got bored, and never touched it again. So I've like virtually never played Metroid. But now, all of a sudden, everyone is freaking out about this new Metroid Dread game that is getting universally high reviews across the board. So I thought this would be the perfect time to give this series another shot. In this video, I'm gonna answer these questions. Is this game really as good as the reviewers say it is? Will someone who has never played Metroid before be able to now get into this series? And finally, will this get me to go back to the Metroid Prime game I left on my shelf for over a decade to potentially get me into the Metroid series and maybe make Metroid videos? Well, let's take a look on today's episode of the Infinite Bits Halloween Extravaganza. How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another episode. But don't forget, if you want to know what next week's video is going to be, then I'll reveal it at the end of this video. But it's weird because today, oddly enough, I feel like I'm not alone when making this episode. But I'm sure that's nothing and definitely won't come into play later. But for now, we have questions that need to be answered about this game, and in order to answer them, we have to fully analyze the different aspects of Metroid Dread. I've basically broke this down into 6 different sections to look at in order to then form a conclusion at the end to see if this game is the game that will hook new players into the Metroid series once and for all. And the first aspect to go over is the exploration through all the levels. This part of the game was honestly one thing that was really well done. It is a Metroidvania game. I mean, obviously, right? It kind of invented the genre. Well, half of it at least, and you have to explore all these areas on an unknown planet. And I was actually surprised on how much I actually enjoyed this part. It was always a great feeling finding a cool new enemy, level mechanic, or whatever else these caves introduce. But it was especially fun finding all the different power-ups and suit upgrades. I really got into and started liking this gameplay loop. And this loop is basically discover a new area with a lot of dead ends, explore the path you can actually go through, and then find a power-up that you can use to get through those previous dead ends that now become new areas to explore. And this type of backtracking, I really didn't mind at all, surprisingly enough. It was fun to go back and reveal all the secret doors I missed. You could really backtrack far to previous areas if you wanted, but they're just for extra optional items. So since that really didn't appeal to me, I could just choose to not go back that far. The only puzzle I thought was kinda dumb though was how they have these breakable walls but give little to no indication that you can break them. So sometimes you would just shoot everywhere until something breaks. While not hard to figure out, it seems like a dated and kinda lame puzzle. However, this hardly detracts from how great the exploration is. But there's something in this game that really shakes up the gameplay in a brand new way. And okay, what is all of this? Creepy music, horror filter, and smoke effects? Now, this box over here does kind of seem suspiciously placed. So, like any good horror movie, let's check it out. Oh. It's just my copy of Metroid Dread. I mean, what's so scary about this game? Alright, the Emmy sections. Yes, and this is the next aspect of the game we're looking at. In these parts, you are not the bounty hunter anymore, but rather the huntee, or something like that. Only in certain areas, these robot dogs of sorts called Emmy try and hunt you down and will instantly kill you if they get you. You can't fight back, so you have to cleverly maneuver around all these different environments to avoid these things. I like these sections because of the unfamiliar twist they provide, and they complement really well with the other style of gameplay. And it legitimately does provide a lot of great tension when you barely make it to your hiding spot with this thing looking directly at you. Ugh. And all this tension and fear made it a lot more satisfying when you actually could defeat the Emmy. And speaking of the enemies, that brings me to the next point, which is, well, the combat of this game, or fighting against the enemies. And they were all actually really fun to fight as well. All of them had their own unique attack patterns that you had to learn, and once you did, it felt like you were mastering the combat. I really like how when new enemies are first introduced, they always seem to be a lot tougher than the enemies you've seen before and are a struggle to fight. But then after a few upgrades in that area, you blast right through these guys like nobody's business, giving you a great sense of progression in the game. Also, you do have the option to parry certain enemies' moves, and it's very satisfying once you hit it and get the timing down right. Plus, it gives you extra loot, so it's a nice risk-reward option. I mean, okay, I feel like it's not balanced the greatest, because with some enemies, the easiest way to defeat them is just to wait for a parry and then one-shot them, but still, I like the parry mechanic. And then there's the boss enemies. These fights are a noticeable difficulty spike in the game. You're probably gonna die a few times when you're just trying to learn the patterns. But once you get the boss down pat and are able to dodge his attacks while hitting him at the right time, it becomes super rewarding to finally take these beasts down, and I enjoyed fighting all of them. Well, except for this water guy, literally all he does is just throw balls at you. This fight sucks, but the rest were great. And okay, side note, I literally didn't even realize I was supposed to use the missiles during the bosses until like halfway through the game, so that's maybe why I found them tougher. I don't know, it could be that I missed a line of text or something where it was all explained, but how am I supposed to know this? Regardless though, these fights were all very well designed. Now let's move on to the controls, which is a very important thing to get right in a non-linear game like this. And I definitely would say they nailed this aspect, and the controls really enhanced the gameplay. They're silky smooth, like butter. Everything felt responsive and snappy. You can run pretty fast as is, can turn on a dime, and you have great air maneuverability. This makes the game way more fun, just in general, since moving around all these environments is enjoyable. And this only gets better the more you play the game, since you get more abilities that lets you maneuver around these environments in new ways. But even though these are great, I still have a few problems with the controls, but these are really more to do with the control options rather than the control set itself, because you can't change your control layout at all. Nintendo does this sort of thing a lot actually. For example, you can only use the analog stick for your movement. And for 2D games, this is especially annoying since a lot of people prefer to use the D-pad for this style. Plus, the D-pad is literally only used for one thing and one thing only, and that's this. Yup, it just toggles the map. It's virtually unused. Okay, and then the other control issue for me is that you have to hold the trigger down when switching your blaster to like rockets or your beam. I wish you could either just press it once or be able to cycle through them all, because it's kind of annoying to always have to hold down this button, and can get more confusing this way. However, these are minor gripes I have, but overall the game controls great. Now let's talk about the next aspect on this list here, the graphics and art style. And I thought overall it was a pretty good looking game. The art style went for an in-between of cartoony and realistic, but leaning towards the realistic side, and it worked well for this. Samus's design looks really awesome, and all of the different suits you unlock for her too. Even the cutscenes are super cool as well. Really action-packed, straight to the point, little epic scenes. And then just all the different environments for the areas were another highlight too. Each area had a different visual style to them that made them easily recognizable from one another just from looking at it. The frame rate can occasionally drop, but most of the time it does run at 60 FPS. Oh, and all of the bosses looked super epic and had great intro cutscenes that were really well done. But with all this great stuff aside, I do have one big issue with just how everything looks, and that is, why is there so much black nothingness just taking up a lot of the screen space? I'm talking about all of this area here. Honestly, it looks pretty odd when you see these really nice background visuals that contrast with the solid black walls. Like, I get this was the way they showed where all the walls and barriers of a level were, but some more detail rather than totally blacking out these areas would have made the game a lot more visually appealing. I thought this might just be a Metroid thing or something, but then I looked at the last 2D Metroid game on the 3DS, Samus Returns, And it did this aspect a lot better than this game. Look how the edges of the map in this game were clearly shown, but still were given a lot of detail. If this was Metroid Dread, for example, the level would probably look more like this instead. But that was just something I noticed. Okay, but enough about the visuals. Before we answer those questions at hand, I want to briefly touch on the story. Well, you play as Samus, and get lost in the depths of this mysterious planet that you were lured to by a virus. And then you just gotta get back to your ship and escape the planet. That is an oversimplification because there were a lot of great story moments and surprises along the way, but still, it is a very simple plot. Which is fine for a game like this, but it would have been cool, I think, if they had a bit more story moments and cutscenes in the game to really drive the player to want to progress. And okay, I gotta say, the intro was not a great first impression for me. It literally opens with text on top of pictures with nothing else going on. What? I don't want to read right off the bat. This is supposed to be a little recap of the previous games, but it would have been a lot more engaging if this was someone telling us this in a cutscene, or Samus being briefed in her ship with this data, something like that. However, it doesn't last that long, and then we see the first real cutscene, and they all look really cool, I gotta say. And that is really everything in the Metroid Dread package. So now I think it's time to go back to the original question at hand and conclude everything. And that is, if you play this game without knowing anything about Metroid, or you previously didn't like Metroid, will it hook you enough to get into this series? Well, I'll go with yes, but like with an asterisk, because while this game is really fun and solid, I did kinda have to stick with it for a bit and really get into the game to want to play more. The intro was kinda slow, but after you get a few more suit upgrades, the gameplay becomes a lot more snappy, and a lot more story moments get added, which then incentivized me to really want to continue playing. Now, if you're not a fan of backtracking, I will say it is still there, but you're really not required to backtrack throughout the whole map. You can though, only if you want to get extra optional items, but the required backtracking was actually quite pleasant because of the snappiness and speed of your movement. However, it can still be frustrating to get stuck because you missed like one small thing, but those moments were few and far between. So, then to answer the other question, will this get me to play the other Metroid Prime games? I'm not even just saying this, but yeah, more than ever, I'm interested in checking them out now. No guarantees, right? But Metroid Dread gave me a taste of 2D Metroid, so now, more than ever, I kinda want to at least try going all in with the big 3D Metroid games. And heck, if I really get into the Metroid Prime series, then Metroid videos may soon follow. Okay, and that's really it for today's episode. So, moving on to next week's video. Basically, what I'm doing for that is... Hey, who are you? Seriously, guys? This isn't even a real Emmy. It's a PNG picture of one. This is it. This is the scariest thing you can get for this episode. I don't know who's in charge of the budget of the show anyways. But at least behind that Emmy was this. A copy of the Scooby-Doo video game. Sure, why not?